Nintendo published an official Zelda timeline in 2011 that was supposed to answer every question about how the games connect. Child timeline, adult timeline, fallen hero timeline. Finally, everything made sense. Except it didn't, because buried within the games themselves are patterns, connections, and historical echoes that the official timeline doesn't fully explain. Ruins that appear in multiple eras that shouldn't exist. Technology that vanishes and reappears across thousands of years. Prophecies that seem to know things they couldn't possibly know. What if the timeline Nintendo gave fans was just the surface layer of something far more complex? The Hyrule Historia, published by Dark Horse Books with Nintendo supervision in 2011 in Japan and 2013 internationally, presents a branching timeline that splits after Ocarina of Time into three distinct paths. The child timeline follows Link returning to his childhood, warning Zelda about Ganondorf, leading to the events of Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, and Four Swords adventures. The adult timeline continues from the future where Link defeated Ganon, leading to the Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. The Fallen Hero timeline assumes Link failed to defeat Ganon, resulting in A Link to the Past, the Oracle games, Link's Awakening, the original Legend of Zelda, and The Adventure of Link. This timeline was revolutionary when released. For the first time, Nintendo officially confirmed how games connected across decades of releases. Fans had speculated for years, creating elaborate theories about timeline placement. The official chronology seemed to settle debates and provide definitive answers. But the timeline also created new questions. How does a timeline branch based on a theoretical failure that never happens in the game? Why do certain elements appear across all three branches when they should be unique to specific timelines? Most importantly, why do games set thousands of years apart feature remarkably similar ruins, recurring place names, and technology that seems to operate on cycles of discovery and loss? Breath of the Wild, released in 2017, complicated matters further. The game references events from all three timeline branches. Ruto, a sage from Ocarina of Time, is mentioned. The Rito, who only exist in the adult timeline after Hylians evolved in the Wind Waker, appear as a fully established race. Death Mountain, Zora's Domain, and other location names persist despite supposed timeline separation. Creating a Champion, the official art and lore book for Breath of the Wild, deliberately avoids placing the game in any specific timeline branch, suggesting it occurs so far in the future that the branches may have reconverged or become irrelevant. Tears of the Kingdom in 2023 added another layer by revealing ancient history that predates Skyward Sword in some respects, while also following Breath of the Wild chronologically. The Zonai civilization, the founding of Hyrule by Rauru and Sonia, and Ganondorf's first sealing are presented as ancient history, but they contradict or complicate what Skyward Sword established as the origin of Hyrule and the Master Sword. This isn't poor continuity management. Nintendo's developers are meticulous about lore details. Eiji Aonuma, the series producer, has stated in multiple interviews that the team carefully considers how each game fits into Zelda's larger mythology. The apparent contradictions and mysterious patterns aren't mistakes. They're intentional design choices that suggest something deeper is happening beneath the surface timeline. The key to understanding Hyrule's real history lies in recognizing that the Zelda series isn't just about chronological sequence. It's about cycles, echoes, and the eternal return of fundamental archetypes. Skyward Sword explicitly establishes the concept of cyclical conflict. At the game's conclusion, the Demon King Demise places a curse on Link and Zelda. His exact words, preserved in the official English localization and confirmed in Hyrule Historia, promise that an incarnation of his hatred will be reborn in a cycle without end. Those who share the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero will face this hatred throughout eternity. This curse is the foundation of everything that follows. It's not just that evil returns, it's that specific roles return. The hero, the princess, the force of malice. These aren't random individuals who happen to share names. They're cosmic positions that different souls occupy across time, fulfilling the same essential functions in an eternal struggle. But here's what makes this fascinating. The curse doesn't prescribe exactly how events must unfold. Each cycle adapts to its era's specific circumstances. Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time seeks the Triforce to rule the world. Ganondorf in Twilight Princess, having already failed once, seeks to destroy the world out of spite. Calamity Ganon in Breath of the Wild has degraded into pure malice, barely retaining consciousness. The role remains constant, the incarnation of hatred, but the manifestation changes based on historical context. The same applies to Link and Zelda. The hero of time in Ocarina of Time is a child thrust into adult responsibilities. The hero of winds in The Wind Waker must prove himself worthy of the hero of time's legacy despite no blood connection. The hero of the wild in Breath of the Wild is a silent knight burdened by duty and expectation. Each Link embodies courage differently because each era demands different expressions of courage. This cyclical pattern extends beyond characters to locations, creating geographical echoes that transcend timeline branches. Hyrule Castle appears in nearly every Zelda game, but its position and significance shift. In Ocarina of Time, it's the political and spiritual center of Hyrule. In Twilight Princess, it's a fortress under siege. In Breath of the Wild, it's a corrupted ruin emanating malice. In Tears of the Kingdom, it's revealed to have been built directly over the chamber where Ganondorf was sealed thousands of years ago. The castle's persistence isn't just tradition or developer convenience. The land itself seems to remember. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom explicitly show that Hyrule Castle has been built, destroyed, and rebuilt multiple times across tens of thousands of years. Each iteration sits atop the ruins of previous versions, creating literal layers of history. The castle's position isn't arbitrary. It marks a place of power where the conflict between light and darkness repeatedly manifests. The Temple of Time provides another example of geographical memory. In Ocarina of Time, it houses the Master Sword and the Door of Time leading to the Sacred Realm. In Twilight Princess, it's an ancient ruin in the Faron Woods, barely recognizable. In Breath of the Wild, it's a crumbling shell on the Great Plateau. In Tears of the Kingdom, a different Temple of Time exists in the ancient past during Hyrule's founding, suggesting the location has been sacred across multiple iterations of Hyrulean civilization. The Master Sword's resting place shows similar patterns. In A Link to the Past, it sleeps in the Lost Woods. In Ocarina of Time, it's in the Temple of Time. In The Wind Waker, it's in Hyrule Castle beneath the ocean. In Breath of the Wild, it's returned to the forest. The sword doesn't randomly teleport. Civilizations deliberately place it in specific locations based on tradition, prophecy, or practical defense considerations. But the fact that these locations repeatedly become important across different timeline branches suggests something more than coincidence. The Lost Woods appears across multiple games in various forms. Sometimes it's called Faron Woods, sometimes it's the Minish Woods, but it's always a sacred forest where ordinary people become lost, where time flows strangely, and where ancient spirits dwell. The Kokiri in Ocarina of Time, the Koroks in The Wind Waker, and the Koroks again in Breath of the Wild all serve as forest guardians in different eras. The Great Deku Tree, or a successor bearing the same name, appears across multiple timelines as the forest's protector. These aren't different forests that happen to be similar. They're the same essential place persisting through time, maintaining its nature despite surface changes. The land itself seems to remember. Technology in Hyrule follows a pattern of cyclical rise and fall that the official timeline doesn't fully address. Advanced civilizations develop incredible technology. That technology either helps or threatens Hyrule, and then it vanishes, only to be rediscovered thousands of years later. The Oka in Twilight Princess are described as ancient beings who helped create Hyrule and once possessed flying technology. They live in the City in the Clouds, a massive structure floating above the clouds, featuring incredibly advanced architecture and mechanisms. The game implies the Oka are ancient beyond measure, predating most of Hyrulean history. Yet their technology shares similarities with Skyloft in Skyward Sword, which chronologically predates Twilight Princess by thousands of years. The Sheikah technology in Breath of the Wild represents another cycle. 10,000 years before the game's events, an ancient Calamity Ganon threatened Hyrule. The Sheikah tribe developed advanced technology, guardians, divine beasts, shrines, and towers to combat this threat. The technology succeeded, Ganon was sealed, and Hyrule entered an era of peace. But fear of the Sheikah's power led the Hyrulean monarchy to suppress the technology and exile many Sheikah, splitting the tribe into the loyal Sheikah and the rebel Yiga clan. When Calamity Ganon returned 100 years before Breath of the Wild, Hyrule desperately excavated and reactivated the ancient Sheikah technology. But Ganon corrupted the Guardians and Divine Beasts, turning Hyrule's greatest weapons into instruments of destruction in the game's backstory. Tears of the Kingdom introduces Zonai technology, which predates the Sheikah devices but function on remarkably similar principles. Both use energy sources that aren't fully explained. Both feature constructs that can be controlled remotely. Both involve shrine-like structures scattered across Hyrule containing puzzles and treasures. Both civilizations mysteriously vanished, leaving only ruins and automated systems behind. The pattern is unmistakable. Advanced civilizations rise, develop technology to combat threats, succeed, decline, and are forgotten until the next crisis forces the rediscovery of ancient knowledge. This isn't just narrative convenience, it's a deliberate thematic statement about how history repeats, how knowledge can be lost, and how each generation must rediscover wisdom from the past. What makes this particularly intriguing is that different timeline branches show the same pattern. The Sheikah technology exists in Breath of the Wild regardless of which timeline branch the game occupies. The Zonai ruins appear to predate the timeline split entirely. This suggests that certain historical forces, the rise and fall of advanced civilizations, operate independently of timeline branches, as if the land itself follows patterns that transcend individual historical sequences. Prophecies and legends in Zelda games frequently reference events they shouldn't know about, suggesting that Hyrule's history contains layers of foreknowledge and cyclical memory. The fortune tellers in Ocarina of Time's Bombchu bowling alley make predictions about Link's future that prove accurate. The prophecy of the Great King of Evil is known before Ganondorf's betrayal, suggesting someone foresaw his rise. The Sheikah, particularly Impa, demonstrate knowledge of future events that they shouldn't possess based on linear time. The royal family in The Wind Waker maintains legends about the hero of time despite hundreds of years passing and the entire kingdom being flooded. King Dofnus Nohansen Hyrule explains that when the hero of time departed the world, people prayed for his return. The legends persisted across centuries, shaping how the flooded world's inhabitants understood their own history. The King of Red Lions explicitly states that the goddesses flooded Hyrule to prevent Ganondorf from obtaining the Triforce, suggesting divine intervention guided by foreknowledge of what would happen if Ganon succeeded. Breath of the Wild's Sheikah technology shows the most explicit example of historical foreknowledge. The shrines, towers, and divine beasts were built 10,000 years ago specifically to combat Calamity Ganon. But how did ancient Hyrule know that Ganon would return in that specific form? How did they know to build exactly 4 divine beasts corresponding to exactly 4 champions? The Sheikah slate itself contains the answer. This device, created 10,000 years ago, interfaces perfectly with all Sheikah technology across Hyrule. It provides Link with abilities, bombs, stasis, magnesis, cryonis, that are precisely calibrated to solve the puzzles in shrines built millennia ago. The ancient Sheikah didn't just build general-purpose technology, they built specific solutions to specific problems they somehow knew future heroes would face. Tears of the Kingdom reveals that Zelda, after traveling 10,000 years into the past and transforming into a dragon, spends millennia preserving the Master Sword for Link. Her dragon form is visible in the sky throughout ancient history, meaning past civilizations would have seen an eternal dragon carrying a sacred sword. This explains how prophecies could reference the Master Sword's eventual restoration. They witnessed it happening over thousands of years. This creates a closed time loop where the future influences the past, which in turn shapes the future. Zelda's sacrifice in the past enables Link's victory in the future, which was only necessary because Ganondorf was sealed in the past, which creates the conditions for everything that follows. Linear cause and effect break down when time travel enters the equation. The implications are staggering.
If the past can be influenced by the future, then history isn't fixed. Events that seem inevitable might actually be the result of choices made in later eras. Prophecies aren't predictions of an unchangeable future, they're observations of a future that already affected the past. This suggests Hyrule's history operates on two levels simultaneously. There's the surface chronology that the official timeline maps, the sequence of games in their linear historical order, but beneath this lies a deeper pattern where time loops back on itself, where futures echo into pasts, and where certain events must occur to maintain causal consistency. Character motivations and societal structures across games show remarkable parallels that suggest historical patterns repeating themselves with variations. The Gerudo tribe's relationship to Hyrule follows a consistent pattern. They're typically isolated in the desert, viewed with suspicion by Hylians, and struggling with the legacy of Ganondorf's betrayal. In Ocarina of Time, Ganondorf is the Gerudo king who betrays the alliance with Hyrule.
In Four Swords Adventures, another Ganondorf rises among the Gerudo despite laws prohibiting males from leadership. In Breath of the Wild, the Gerudo have completely banned men from their city, a policy explicitly connected to shame over Ganondorf's actions in the distant past. The Zora similarly follow patterns of conflict and alliance with Hyrule. In Ocarina of Time, the Zora are close allies, with Princess Ruto serving as a sage. In Breath of the Wild, the Zora remember events from 10,000 years ago, including the death of the Zora champion Mipha 100 years prior, creating a resentment toward Hyrule for failing to protect their princess. Yet they still aid Link, continuing the cycle of Zora supporting the hero despite historical grievances. The Goron tribe consistently occupies volcanic regions, consistently values strength and brotherhood, and consistently provides Link with essential aid. Across multiple timeline branches and thousands of years, the Gorons maintain remarkably consistent culture and values. This suggests that certain aspects of racial identity in Hyrule persist regardless of historical changes, as if the land shapes its inhabitants into archetypal roles. The royal family of Hyrule demonstrates similar patterns. Every era features a Princess Zelda bearing the blood of the goddess. Every era shows the royal family maintaining traditions, prophecies, and knowledge passed down through generations. The family understands their role in the eternal cycle even when specific historical details are lost. In Breath of the Wild, Zelda struggles with her inability to access her sealing powers, feeling she's failing her destiny. Her diary entries reveal intense pressure from her father and from tradition, demanding she fulfilled the role destiny assigned her. This pressure exists because the royal family remembers, however imperfectly, that a princess with sealing powers is essential to stopping calamity. The memory of past cycles shapes present expectations, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where Zelda must awaken powers because history demands it. These social and political patterns suggest Hyrule civilizations unconsciously recreate similar structures across eras. The Gerudo isolate themselves, the Zora maintain long memories, the Gorons value strength, the Hylians build kingdoms around a royal family descended from the goddess. These aren't random choices by individuals, they're roles that societies fall into because the land and the curse shape them into these patterns. Breath of the Wild represents something unique in Zelda's chronology, a point where all timeline branches potentially converge. The game references elements from all three branches, occurs so far in the future that past differences may have become irrelevant, and presents a Hyrule that contains echoes of every era. The divine beasts are named after sages and champions from previous games, Vah Ruta for Princess Ruto, Vah Rudania for Darunia, Vah Medo for Medli, and Vah Naboris for Naboru. These characters come from different timeline branches. Ruto and Darunia are from Ocarina of Time, Medli is from the Wind Waker in the adult timeline, and Naboru is from Ocarina of Time but plays different roles in different timelines. The game's existence of both Rito and Zora simultaneously contradicts the Wind Waker's establishment that the Rito evolved from the Zora after Hyrule flooded. Yet both races coexist in Breath of the Wild, suggesting either the timeline branches merged or the game occupies a unique position outside normal chronology. Creating a champion deliberately avoids placing Breath of the Wild in a specific timeline, with developer interviews explaining that the game occurs so far in the future that branching timelines may have reconverged. This isn't an evasion of continuity questions, it's a statement about how time operates in Zelda's universe. Given enough time, different historical branches can merge back together, especially if the same fundamental forces, the hero's spirit, the goddess's bloodline, and the incarnation of hatred, continue operating across all branches. Tears of the Kingdom takes this further by showing that Hyrule has been founded, destroyed, and refounded multiple times. The founding shown in Tears of the Kingdom's flashbacks appears to be a refounding after a previous destruction, not the absolute origin of Hyrule. This explains contradictions with Skyward Sword. There have been multiple Hyrulean kingdoms across tens of thousands of years, each building on the ruins of its predecessors. This reveals the hidden truth about Hyrule's history. It's not a single continuous story, it's a palimpsest, a manuscript that's been written over multiple times, with traces of previous texts still visible beneath the surface. Each era of Hyrule writes its own history atop the ruins of past eras, and those ruins continue influencing present events even when their original context is lost. The environmental storytelling in recent games makes this explicit. Players exploring Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom constantly encounter ruins from multiple eras layered atop each other. Ancient Zonai structures beneath Hyrule Castle, Shikai shrines scattered across the landscape, crumbling temples whose original purpose is forgotten. Each layer represents a different historical cycle, a different iteration of civilization rising and falling.
The land remembers even when people forget. Certain locations remain significant across thousands of years because they mark places where the barrier between the mundane and the divine grows thin. Hyrule Castle sits atop the seal containing Ganondorf, not by accident, but by design, or perhaps by the land's own memory of what that location means. This creates a meta-narrative that exists beyond any individual game or timeline branch. The true story of Hyrule isn't the sequence of historical events, it's the pattern of those events, the cycle of rise and fall, of heroism and sacrifice, of darkness threatening and light prevailing. This pattern repeats with variations across eras, creating a deeper structure that individual games participate in without fully revealing. The official timeline is real and accurate as far as it goes. The games do occur in the sequence Hyrule Historia presents, but that chronological sequence is only one dimension of a more complex historical structure. Beneath the linear timeline lies the cyclical pattern of recurrence, and beneath that lies the deeper truth of how specific locations, technologies, and social structures echo across time, regardless of timeline branches. Nintendo hasn't hidden this history. They've embedded it throughout the games for players willing to look deeper than surface chronology. The ruins, the prophecies, the recurring names, the technological cycles, all of these are evidence of a more sophisticated approach to world building than simple linear storytelling. This is why debates about timeline placement often miss the point. Whether Breath of the Wild occurs in the child timeline, adult timeline, or fallen hero timeline matters less than recognizing it participates in patterns that transcend those branches. The game contains elements from all three timelines because it's showing how those timelines eventually merge through the operation of deeper historical forces. The cycle of heroism continues regardless of which specific path history took to reach any given point. The hero's spirit reincarnates whether Link succeeded or failed in Ocarina of Time. The goddess's bloodline persists in all branches. The incarnation of hatred returns in different forms across different timelines. These fundamental forces operate independently of specific historical sequences, and they eventually guide separated timelines back toward convergence. This reveals the genius of Zelda's approach to continuity. Most game franchises that attempt long-running continuity either maintain strict canon, which constrains creativity, or abandon continuity entirely, which prevents meaningful connections between entries. Zelda found a middle path: establish a chronological sequence that satisfies fans who care about literal timeline placement, but build a deeper cyclical structure that allows creative freedom while maintaining thematic coherence. Developers can create games in any era, any timeline branch, any historical period because the cycle operates everywhere. A game set during Hyrule's founding, during its height, during its fall, or during its rebuilding all participate in the same essential patterns. The specific era matters less than the role that era plays in the cycle. This is why future Zelda games will continue referencing past entries while remaining accessible to new players. The references aren't just nostalgia, they're evidence of the cycle. When a new game features ruins from a previous game, it's not just an Easter egg, it's proof that history layered itself again, that another civilization rose and fell, that the pattern continued. The question isn't whether Nintendo hid Hyrule's real history. The question is whether players have been looking at the right kind of history. The chronological sequence is visible on the surface. The cyclical patterns require deeper examination, and the meta-narrative connecting everything requires stepping back to see the entire structure at once. Hyrule's history is simultaneously linear, cyclical, and layered. It progresses chronologically from Skyward Sword's ancient past toward Breath of the Wild's distant future. It repeats cyclically as the hero, princess, and evil reincarnate across eras, and it layers iteratively as each civilization builds atop the ruins of its predecessors, creating a palimpsest where multiple histories coexist in the same space. This complexity is intentional. It reflects the kind of deep world building that rewards exploration and analysis. Players can enjoy any Zelda game as a standalone adventure without understanding the larger patterns, but those who look deeper discover that every game participates in something larger, an eternal cycle of heroism, sacrifice, and renewal that transcends any single entry. The real history of Hyrule isn't hidden, it's hiding in plain sight, visible to anyone willing to examine the ruins, trace the prophecies, and recognize that some stories are too large to be contained in linear chronology. They require cycles, they require echoes, they require the understanding that in a world where time travel exists, where spirits reincarnate, and where the land itself remembers, history is never quite as simple as it first appears.